What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Always Compete Seahawks podcast. I am Sam. Mike cannot join me right now, but I'm going solo because this is a video that I really wanted to make, and it's something that I really wanted to talk about. I am maybe half an hour removed from the Seahawks, losing to the Chicago Bears 25-24 at home, and I have some thoughts, not so much on the game, just on the state of this team. And I want to get my thoughts on those. It's going to be kind of a mini rant, mini solo kind of breakdown of what I think this team should do. And personally, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with some of the stuff that I say, and a lot of people you will agree with the stuff that I'm going to say. So I'm just going to get into it. I'm not even going to really talk about the Bears game much. Blew a big lead in the second half. Team was just, the defense especially, just looked tired and dead kind of the entire fourth quarter. Now they tried, they fought, but just to get beat by the Bears with their third string quarterback is flat out embarrassing to me. I'm going to get into what I think about this team. So I'm going to start with, do we rebuild? And this is kind of the obviously the overarching question with this team right now. And it's the question that everybody really, I think, should be asking. Does this team really begin a rebuild? And how do we know that they've committed to a rebuild? Well, I think the first step that would come with the rebuild is having to fire Pete Carroll. He's a objectively terrible coach for the modern day. He has two potentially generational talent, one generational talent and two elite wide receivers. And yet it seems that he very rarely sets up plays to target them, very rarely sets up plays that are in their favor, and very rarely wants to do anything. The defense that he once, walked around on a big flag in the city saying, look at this defense that I've built. I'm the defensive guy. Look at this LOB that I have created. It's great. It's awesome. It's now one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They've given up the most yards by far by any team in the NFL. And sure, fifth scoring defense. Great. Awesome. That's cool. But great defenses don't give up yards. They don't give up a lot of yards. This defense is giving up just about 400 yards a game, and it's absolutely dumb. I don't understand how a defensive coach has lasted so long, especially in the last 5 years, with a defense that is so awful on paper. I don't understand how he's lasted so long. And the main reason is he's successful. Well, that kind of brings me to my second reason, is that, what's the reason that we've been successful over the last couple of years? It's Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, especially last year for the first half of the year, essentially carried this football team by its ear across the finish line to win the NFC West. And I know that towards the end of the year, he started to struggle a little bit, but that doesn't really matter to me. My point is that Pete Carroll, in the last 5 years especially, has completely rode off of Russell Wilson and rode off of the success that he's brought to this football team, which has just been amazing. Russell Wilson is an amazing quarterback, which is why it will anger so many of you to hear this. But if we rebuild, and I'm using that word rebuild, I'm not using any other word, and I'll get to another scenario in a second. If we rebuild, Russ has to be the first domino to fall, or one of the first, mainly because people don't tend to understand the term rebuild. Rebuild. What does it mean to rebuild? Well, there's two different ways, right? Another one that Pete mentioned after 2017 when we did make the playoffs was retool. And we did that. We got a few pieces in the offseason that came in, played well, and we kind of brought a few guys up, like Shaquille Griffin, who had a couple breakout years, and bang, we made the playoffs for the next 3 seasons. That's awesome. That's great. Retooling, perfect. But the Seahawks in 2017 went 9-7 and just barely missed the playoffs. They're actually in contention until the very last minute of their game, and when they lost, and the Falcons won, putting them in the playoffs over the Seahawks. So, I mean, this is not like some kind of situation where we're like, oh, we were almost there. We just need that extra piece. No, this is a 5-10 team that is playing god-awful football. god awful football. It at some points it's very tough to watch because I know the talent that's on this team. I know what they can bring, and they're just not doing it. Which is why a retool would be keeping Russ and building around him. A rebuild is a different thing. I want to put this in the term of a skyscraper or just a house in general, right? A retool would be renovating the house, go inside, adding a few things that make the house better to make it the best house it can be. A rebuild is tearing the house down and starting from square one. Those of the Seahawks fans that are out there that are saying, we need to rebuild, but we need to keep Russ, keep Bobby. Sure, they're great players. I know that they're great. I'm not saying that they suck. But rebuild and retool are two very different things. And it seems that for Seahawks fans, those terms have kind of melded together into one singular phrase. If you want to go the retool way, I think the biggest issue with that is that retooling means keeping Pete Carroll. That's probably what it means, because Pete Carroll seems to just have some overarching hand in the Seahawks organization that he can't get fired, or he runs this or he runs that. He technically has authority over John Schneider because he was hired before John Schneider and he had a couple things in his contract. It's a whole big stupid thing. My point is Pete Carroll needs to go, and that's going to need to be the first step. And if you want to use the rebuild word, you have to trade Russ if you want to rebuild. If you want to retool, keep Russ. That's fine. Keep Russ, keep Bobby, keep the guys that are great and maybe a little bit more expensive, and go forward with the few picks you have and a lot of money that you have to, add a couple guys that could make this team a playoff contender next year. This team is not going to contend for a while. And it's kind of weird for me to say that, but looking at the division that we're in right now, the Cardinals, they're going to be great next year because they're only going to get better, I assume. The 49ers, they're going to be great next year because they're going to get Trey Lance up. He's going to be developed. He's going to be a stud. The 49ers are going to have a way higher ceiling with Trey Lance than with Jimmy Garoppolo. And then you're talking about the Rams, who, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, they have a lot of young studs out there, Cooper Kupp. All of those guys are below 30 or 30 below. So, that's a team. Those three teams are not going anywhere. Do you think that the Seahawks with one or two additions will be better than any single one of those teams? I don't think so. Especially considering who we might lose in free agency, losing Quandre Diggs, losing DJ Reed, even losing Dwayne Brown. And a lot of people are going to say Dwayne Brown sucks this year, which he kind of does. To be fair, he kind of does. He's had a very rough season. He's had a bad season by Dwayne Brown's standards. He's had a bad season by really any left tackle standards. The point is that replacing a left tackle is one of the hardest things you can do in the NFL. To find a reliable left tackle that knows what to do and has been in the league for a very long time is not something that you're just going to be able to do in one off season. It's really not. It's either you get a stud left tackle in the draft or you get a stud left tackle in free agency. There's not a whole lot of guys in free agency this year that are going to be better than Dwayne Brown. You want to swing for the fences to get Terron Armstead? Fine. Then you could probably say goodbye to Quandre Diggs, who's going to want $10+ million after the Pro Bowl, potential all-pro season that he's putting together right now. So, the point is that retooling this team is going to be very hard with what we have at the moment. And that's why if you want to rebuild, guys like Bobby, Russ, those are going to be the first two names on that list who are going to have to go for two reasons. Especially for Bobby, this doesn't really matter for Russ. I'm not really going to count this for us, but just for Bobby, age is very important. Bobby Wagner, I'm not going to make any projections. I don't know how anything's going to go. I can't predict the future. But Bobby Wagner is 32 years old. He's played in the NFL for next year will be his 10th season. Your body is going to begin to break down. And he's also on the last year of his contract. Jordan Brooks looks like a stud. I think that if you rebuild, Bobby Wagner has to go this year, considering A, he's coming off a great season. His value is very high. B, it would get tons of money off the books. And C, you can trade him while his value is at its highest and not risking an injury and then just having him walk out in free agency next year. Russ is a shaky subject for me because he's done so much for this organization. And he's a great player. He's exceptional. He's had an off season this year at sometimes. I don't really care. He's just an exceptional player. He's so great, man. And it's something that hurts to say, but if a rebuild comes, like I said, Russ will have to be one of the first guys out the door, because a rebuild is literally clean slating it, starting from the ground up once again. We don't have picks to do a clean slate. We don't have picks at all. We don't have picks to do a clean slate. If you want to do a clean slate, you have to wipe it clean. If you really want to rebuild, you have to trade Russ. That's my argument here. I don't necessarily want to trade Russ, but if you want to use the rebuild word, if you want to say, oh, it's time for the Seahawks to rebuild, you have to trade Russell Wilson. I'm sorry. There's no other way. You can't rebuild while keeping your elite franchise quarterback. That's called a retool. It's not a rebuild. Do you think Russ would want to stay here if you rip down the entire thing around him and add in a couple guys who may or may not be better? I don't think Russ would love that, frankly, with the point that he's at in his career where he's trying to win a Super Bowl. Russ does not want to be a part of a rebuild, and neither does Pete Carroll. Neither of those guys want to be a part of a rebuild where you have maybe potentially consecutive seasons where you are going to be bad. Russ is the ultimate winner, and Pete Carroll is an older man. He's the oldest coach in the NFL. He's 70 years old. Do you think he wants to spend the remaining years of his career, which are certainly limited at this point, losing over and over again, which might be the way that this team has to head if you want to decide to go for a rebuild, considering that everyone will say, oh, but look at the talent. You got DK, you got Tyler Lockett, you got Chris Carson next year. You have guys like Jordan Brooks, Darrell Taylor, Alton Robinson, Poona Ford, Jamal Adams. All those guys are really good. But the point is that we were bad when they were playing this year, even when they were playing this year. I'm not saying that that's the reason why we're bad, but I'm saying that kind of talent isn't going to necessarily automatically hand you wins. And obviously a retool would mean adding a Terran Armstead or adding that guy to push us over the edge. The point is, if we were to be pushed at where we're at right now, if this is the edge, we'd be somewhere about here. We'd fall a little forward. Maybe we win 8 games next year. That's kind of where this team is heading, and I don't know where it's going to go. The point is, next, we have to really begin to emphasize our younger guys, man. This has been a team that's focused on retaining the stars that they have for the last few years, especially with Russ and Bobby. And now Tyler Lockett, who's on his third contract with the Seahawks and just got a huge extension. I think he's 30 years old now or somewhere around that. I think he might be like 29 or something. Either way, my point is that Tyler Lockett is one of the hardened veterans on this football team. And those 3 guys have been the core for a good long while. They've been the core of this team for a good long while. Since 2015. They've been the guys. Nobody else has been around that long. Nobody on this team has been around that long besides Pete Carroll. Obviously, he's not a player. So, if you want to rebuild, you have to begin to emphasize the development of Jordan Brooks, who's been phenomenal this year. He really has. He's been great. You watch the tape, he's sideline to sideline every single play. He's so dynamic, so fast, so quick, can make those tackles no matter where they are on the field. And then you're talking about guys on offense, even like the little guys, like Freddie Swain, who's 23 years old. I don't think there's much developing to be done with D. Eskridge because he's going to be 25 next year. And I don't really know how much you can develop from a 25-year-old. So that's kind of questionable for me. But like Freddie Swain, he's a guy who has maybe higher upside than D. Eskridge and is significantly younger than D. Eskridge. Hell, if you want to look in the backfield, if you see a guy like DJ Dallas or even a Josh Johnson in front of the show, Josh Johnson, as younger guys who have serious talent and potential, throw them in these last 2 games that now officially do not matter. The Seahawks have been eliminated from the playoffs. These games do not matter. Throw them in. See what the hell they can do, because DJ Dallas has had points this year where you're like, okay, DJ, I like that. He's starting to he gets confidence. He's a good 3rd down back. He can catch the ball. He can make plays in space. He's a tough runner. I like that. I like that kind of stuff. And I don't understand why you're holding them back behind a guy like Rashad Penny, who's going to be gone after this year, or even Alex Collins, who's probably going to be gone after this year. Let them run. Let them play. Let them do what they have to do. I mean, come on, let them do what they have to do. And you want to continue to go on about these young guys. Let's work on Stone Forsythe. Um, you know, obviously Dwayne would not be happy if he's benched, but if there's a fourth quarter where the game really doesn't seem to matter anymore, throw Stone Forsythe in. Like if week 18, if we're getting blown out by Arizona, put Stone Forsythe in the game. Make sure Gino's in too, because Russ ain't gonna be happy with Stone Forsythe. That is a blind side. But like, throw in Gino or something like that and let Stone Forsythe get minutes. Same thing with Jake Curran on the other side. I don't really think you have to develop Damian Lewis, who's already kind of there. He's a solid player. He's a great run blocker. I like what he can do in the system. Continue to go on about guys on defense. Alton Robinson, phenomenal potential. Daryl Taylor already begun to blossom as a player. And then on the interior, you want to look at Brian Monet, a younger guy who's really begun to come on this year. Puna Ford, who has an extension going through next year. Even if you want to continue to make him a key piece of this defense, we already talked about Jordan Brooks. If you want to even go to Trey Brown, which is a huge one, obviously he can't play for the rest of this year. Next year, he really needs to be a key piece of the secondary that I would love to focus on. Those are the guys right there. That's the pieces that can make such an incredible rebuild. They don't make great retools. I don't think that they make incredible retools. I think if you want to rebuild, you have to get rid of Pete Carroll, Russ, and Bobby Wagner, because A, they would not want to be around for a rebuild. B, we have no picks. They have the highest value and they're the most expensive players on our team. And C, two of them, age is really beginning to matter. And it does not include Russell Wilson. Two of them, age is beginning to matter. It's going to be a long off season. I think we might see a move or two that might shock us. And it might be like, hell yeah, if it's like Pete Carroll or even Dwayne Brown going. But if we get a move like Bobby Wagner just got traded or Russ just got traded, that would be a move that would be a shocker. It would be a game-changing move for this team. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. By the way, everything that I've said isn't necessarily what I want to do. It's what would need to happen, in my opinion, for this team to rebuild. I'm not saying that I want to rebuild. I'm not even saying that I want to retool. I'm just saying that if you want to use the rebuild word and you want to say, let's rebuild, you can't rebuild the house if the walls are still standing. You can't do that. It doesn't work. You can't rebuild the house if the walls are still standing. You can rebuild the house if everything's knocked down and you have a fresh slate to work on, which I think is what we need to do. Give me your thoughts on the game and what I said. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.